in a very unique moment in our civilizational history, at least I firmly believe that, where the Hindu argument, so to speak, is not only coveted, but truly the Hindu argument is one of the last hopes for mankind. The Hindu argument has in many ways answers that the whole world is seeking. Because the Hindu argument, as one has argued for many years now, is essentially an open source architecture. It's an architecture that is built for individuals to adapt the architecture into their own lives and apply it. I was speaking yesterday at San Jose, and I told them that I was wondering what to wear to this part of the world, and then I realized this is, of course, tech country, so I should dress like the tech people, you know, including wear Allbirds shoes, which some of you might know is the latest great startup from Silicon Valley. It's created by this guy who's from New Zealand and who works with wool from New Zealand to make really, and I truly believe I've been wearing it for a year, some of the world's most comfortable shoes. But that's only in the world of materialism. I think the Hindu idea, the Hindu worldview, is at a point in time when we truly can cross over and speak not only to the converted, and this is always my great challenge. Often I feel we land up talking to the converted. It's no point talking to a whole bunch of people who all agree with each other. But today we are finally at a point where I meet in many of my lectures people who might not entirely agree with me, people who might be fence sitters, people who might actually also even actively disagree. But they are for the first time willing to listen to the Hindu imagination of the world. Because the Hindu imagination of the world, as the subtitle of my book suggests, is an imagination of the world that essentially looks at a world free of strife. Because it is willing to listen and accommodate points of views which can be understood, represented, and also give voice to the voiceless. Now, what does all of this mean in the great civilizational context that so many of us are so fond of talking about? So let's go to that whole question of what is a civilization? If I were to ask all of you, what is a civilization? Why do we talk in terms of a civilization? Why should we even care about a civilization? Most of us will live for about, 70, maybe 80 years, 90, if you're lucky. In that, most of your life will be spent in working hard, trying to make a living, get married, have your kids go to school, and so on and so forth. Why do you really care about this whole thing called a civilization, right? Why is it even important? And what is a civilization, right? Who cares whether we have a civilization or not, right? And the answer to me is very clear. A civilization is really a story. All civilizations are in essence stories. And I like to say that all civilizations are stories. Civilizations that survive, though, there are two kinds of stories, right? You know, one is fiction and one is non-fiction, right? Always two kinds of stories, fiction and non-fiction. Civilizations that survive are non-fiction. Civilizations that don't survive are fiction, right? We have survived because, and what is the difference between non-fiction and fiction? The difference between non-fiction and fiction is a civilization based on empirical realities, right? What is an empirical reality? I want to cut at the moment to a question which so many people asked me when I was writing the book. Is the Mahabharata and Ramayana history? Right? This is a question asked again and again. Is there history in the Ramayana and Mahabharata? Right? Is Rama a historical character? Did the Mahabharata, the battle of Kurukshetra, did the Mahabharata really happen? Did the battle of Kurukshetra really happen? As always, there is no simple answer to that question. The answer is yes and no, right? Why is the answer yes and no? Because if you look at the Hindu imagination of the world, and indeed of the civilization called Bharat, the way we looked at our civilization is an imagination that fuses together geography and stories about incidents. Let me explain how. Very simply, no one can really tell you exactly where, with latitude and longitude, the battle of Kurukshetra happened. No one can tell you. It's impossible to tell you, in this square foot area this battle happened, right? However, in the collective memory of entire civilization, there is no doubt that there is a Kurukshetra. Right? That is not disputed. You could say it didn't happen here, it happened whatever, 500 kilometers there, and actually it was here or there. All of this can be, that's an eternal conversation. You can keep having that conversation. Right? There is no doubt that all of these places that we know of, I once asked one of my audiences, how do you know, right? How do you know that there is Ayodhya? Who told you there is Ayodhya? I can come and tell you, no, this is not Ayodhya, right? This is Pittsburgh. I'm just saying, randomly, right? I can give it any name. How do you know that it's Ayodhya? The only answer most people can give is, well, my parents told me so. Or my grandparents told me so. Then you have to immediately ask the question, but how do they know? Right? How do your parents and grandparents know that there was an Ayodhya, or there is an Ayodhya, right? Well, if you went to your grandparents and asked them, you keep telling me there is an Ayodhya, how do you know? The only answer they can give you is, well, my parents told me so, right? And if you went one step higher and asked them, your great-grandparent, they will tell you, well, my parents told me so. This is something called civilizational memory. It's a memory that has percolated over hundreds and thousands of years about geographies that are intertwined in the landscape, stories that are intertwined in the landscape which have given us a sense of geography, right? We are a civilization that is deeply intertwined into places. So therefore we know there is a Mathura, there is a Kashi, right? There is a Kedarnath, right? We know that there are these great temples and these holy sites. We know that there is a Char Dham. Swami Vivekananda was once asked that when you began your spiritual journey, why did you go up and down the country? Right? Why? There was no need. You could have just sat in one place, contemplated about God and so on and so forth. And you would have come to some answers and so on and so forth. And the answer to that question is very interesting. Because the idea, he did it, as did the Adi Shankaracharya before him. Because our idea of the divine is so percolated into the idea of geography. It is in Diana X's memorable words, it is through the footsteps of the pilgrims that we have defined our civilizational spread. As the pilgrims walked from dham to dham, from pilgrimage to pilgrimage, we created our civilization in a cartographic, I like to say we have a cartographic civilization, right? A civilization that can be mapped. Now you could come and say, well, I think because of real estate encroachment, Vrindavan shouldn't be here, it should have been a little here. Those are real estate disputes. I recently said on Twitter that it is, somebody said that supposedly the Mahabharata is a real estate dispute, right? The Mahabharata is of course not a real estate dispute. In fact, that is exactly what it isn't. It is not a real estate dispute. It is a dispute on the concept of what is just. And we will come to that in a bit. What is just? Why are we concerned about justice at all? Right? But let's stick for a moment to this idea that we're a cartographic civilization. Places are very important to us. That's why pilgrimage is very important to us. Right? There's this wonderful story told that when the Goan Inquisition came, right, the Saraswat Brahmins in Goa were given a choice. They were, as always, told, convert, leave or die. It's a very clear choice to the Saraswat Brahmins that either you convert, or you leave, or you die. What did they do? What did many of them do? Very interesting. Many of these families in Goa, in the Konkan, they used to have what we today would call an Ishta Devta, the deity of the household. And the deity of the household was often a structure. It could be a murti, an idol, it could be some other form. It was a structure of some form, right? Or shape. So where would they go if they left? Because staying was not a choice and then converting was not a choice, so they left. So where would they take them? Because remember in those days, where would they take those heavy, stone structures and how would they carry them, right? What they did was, they buried them into the land of the Konkan. They found some spot in the adjoining area of their habitat and they buried those structures. Now you would ask, what's the point of that? Because the family is moving. You bury it somewhere, like, why are you doing it? Right? It's almost useless. But the unique thing is, generation after generation of that family passed on that knowledge on where it was buried. And years later, when those families returned to their homeland, they knew this might be 3 generations, 4 generations, 5 generations ahead. They knew where it was buried. So they could go back and dig those structures out. This is when I heard that's the story for a moment. Remember, some of these stories there may be apocryphal elements to some of these stories. But often you will see, even in our apocryphal stories, they hide a very deep truth. What is the deep truth here? That the knowledge, the civilizational knowledge, it was ensured that it would pass on from generation to generation. That's why we are a cartographic civilization. Places are really important to us because our memory takes us back to places. That's why to the Bengalis, the Kineshwar temple is important. That's why Belur Mutt is important. Right? That's why to the Vedantists among the Bengalis, the Mayavati shrine that Swami Vivekananda built was important. There's a wonderful story about the Mayavati shrine, which I want to share with you. Some of you would know, people who know Ramakrishna Mission, that there are 2 kinds of temples in the world of the Ramakrishna Mission. One, of course, is the Ramakrishna Mission temples, where often when you go in the Garbhagriha, there are 3 idols. One, of course, is Thakur Ma and Shamiji, as the Bengalis would say. Ramakrishna Paramhans, his spiritual consort, the Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. Right? There are three statues that are worshipped. But Vivekananda himself, Swamiji himself, built another set of temples, for the lack of a better word, which were the Advaita ashrams. Now the Advaita ashrams, some of you may have gone there, have nothing. In a sense, they have no altar, and I'm using the word altar loosely, of course. They have no altar, because there the idea always was that it is that moment for you to connect straight to the idea of the Brahman. Right? So there's a wonderful story a monk once told me in the Ramakrishna Mission. By the way, I come from a Ramakrishna Mission tradition. 3 generations of my family have been devoted to the Ramakrishna Mission. I got my Diksha at the age of 10. And I have a very interesting and a colorful journey with the Ramakrishna Mission, including the book I wrote on Swami Vivekananda, which has been launched by Ramakrishna Mission monks around the country and around the world and so on and so forth. But one of the monks, and they have a great sense of humor. Many of these monks are very funny. They have a great sense of humor. They are highly intellectual. So one of them told me a wonderful story once, that there were some guests who came to the Mayavati ashram. And as always, the monks are called Maharaj, So there are various names, and then a Maharaj tag is added to them, right? Because Swamiji was initially called Swamiji Maharaj. So then that tag got carried on to the whole order of the monks, right? So then there was a family that comes to the Mayavati ashram. The Maharaj, the resident monk, meets them and says, "Oh, I'm so happy that you've come. We will have our conversation, but please do go to the meditation center first, spend some time, and then you can come and we can have our conversation," and so on and so forth. So the family goes there and comes back very swiftly. And comes back and says, "But Maharaj, there's nothing there." And the monk is laughing by this time. And he says, "But what did you think there would be there?" And they said, "But Maharaj, this is a Ramakrishna Mission establishment. Even Thakur is not there." Right? So he told me this wonderful story when Swamiji was building this center and these kinds of centers, there were others in the universe of the Ramakrishna Mission who came and told the spiritual consort, the Holy Mother, that what is Noreen doing? He's now building centers where not only is there no God, even Thakur is not there. The ultimate insult. This man has gone crazy, obviously, right? I mean, it's not only does he have none of the great idols, he doesn't even want to put his own spiritual master, right? And so the Holy Mother supposedly at that time laughed and said, "Let him do what he's doing. You do what you're doing, let him do what he's doing," right? The moral of the story, of course, was that he realized, as Swamiji, realized many other things, that there is a path and different people are at a different level. Some people require certain things for their spiritual journey. Some other people require certain other things for their spiritual journey. And everybody needs to be catered to, needs to be shown the way, needs to be guided, needs to be assisted. And I'm saying this story to you because remember, here again comes the idea of location. So it depends on which location, what audience is being catered to, right? That we have built our civilizational memory. On the topic of audience, there's a wonderful story. You know, I often say, I said at the Jaipur Literature Festival also when The Modern Monk came out on Swami Vivekananda, the book that I wrote, that Swamiji realized many vital truths that have never left. Those are the fundamental truths of our civilization. One of the most vital truths that Swami Vivekananda realized, and which is really relevant for all of you because, you know, clearly all of you live and work in America. America is your karma bhumi. For some of you, it may even be your janma bhumi and so on and so forth. Swami Vivekananda realized that in order for Indians to listen to you in India, the first and most important thing that you must do, very critical, is that you must come to America. Right? Because how else would Indians take you seriously? Come on. You know that. Indians are not going to take you seriously until you come and make it in America. Right? So Swami Vivekananda really got that. He's the first person who got that. You know, he's the first person who got this. That you need to crack it in America for the Indians to listen to you. Right? And then he also got the other very interesting thing. You know, there was another monk who told me this, that before Swami Vivekananda wore those robes and that turban, it was unlike any other monk. If you look at the history of monks, nobody else is wearing clothes like that. Why is this Bengali man with no concept? I mean, he comes from a tropical climate. Why is he wearing this heavy coat and this turban and so on and so forth, right? One reason, of course, is it was given to him by the Maharaja of Khetri, some of you may know, right? Who also gave him the money to actually come to America, right? And the Maharaja of Khetri, being a Rajasthani, he of course, you know, had a particular image and so on and so forth. The other reason Swami Vivekananda himself wrote, so he writes a letter soon after he reaches Boston, and he's found a benefactor, and you know, so he's staying with somebody. And he writes a letter where he says, you know, in the evenings when we go out sometimes in a horse carriage, in those days in a horse-driven carriage, people look at me and say, Prince, Prince, which really annoys him. Because here's a man who's truly given up everything, you know, including his home, you know, such a talented man, everything he could have done, you know, all material possessions he's given up. To him being called Prince, which is to him a very, you know, almost like a slur, is really annoying to him. But very quickly he says, but look, at the end of the day, at least by this, they're coming to me. And I cannot give them the message unless they come to me. So once again, even when he landed in America, Swami Vivekananda knew that the big lesson America would teach him, apart from many other things, was the lesson of marketing, because of course America is really good at it, right? So you have to market yourself really well. And with that great lesson, he also was able to give that other great quip, where supposedly, again, maybe an apocryphal story, but a wonderful story nonetheless, at the Parliament of Religions, where somebody told him that the Bhagavad Gita, supposedly there was a pile of books, all, you know, different scriptures. So the Bhagavad Gita was right at the bottom of the pile. And somebody told him, almost jovially, oh look, your book is right at the bottom. So Swami Vivekananda, being Swami Vivekananda, immediately quipped back and said, it is only my book that can take and encompass the load of everything else and still hold. Right? So he would have done very well, clearly, in advertising and marketing. I mean, if he didn't have that future, advertising and marketing was clearly great for Swami. I often tell my younger audiences, and there are some young people here, so let me say this. I often tell my younger audiences that, and I said this, you know, one of the monks was releasing my book at Chennai, and I said this, and he laughed a lot at this. So he said the other last and third most important lesson that Swami Vivekananda learned from America, and also through his life, and also from the life of the Adi Shankaracharya and so on and so forth, was that Swami Vivekananda was the ultimate rock star in Hinduism. You know, in modern Hinduism, in modern memory, if not modern, but modern memory of Hinduism, He's the great rock star. You know, it's undoubtedly true. I mean, if only young people understood that they are putting Che Guevara's face on their t-shirts, but Che Guevara actually wanted to stone homosexuals and kill them and so on and so forth, they wouldn't put that image, right? They would much rather put Swami Vivekananda, who said, we are here to welcome the entire world, all persecuted people we want to welcome, and so on and so forth, right? So clearly, if you want to put somebody on the t-shirt, here's the man who should be put on the t-shirt, not Che Guevara. But he learned another lesson, that what is the one thing you must do if you're a rock star? You must do one thing if you're a rock star. If you want to be a legend, you must do one thing. Well, die young, of course. Right? In order to remain a legend, you must die young. It's very clear. So he learned it both from America and from his own understanding that one of the good uses of your yogic power is, you want to remain a legend for life and remember till eternity, you must die young. Quickly get your job done and die young. Right? So he was a great master. I mean, I was just telling Shinji-san that if there is one great influence in my life, ever, it is Swami Vivekananda. He's had the greatest impact of my life. And I think his message is particularly resonant today. Because what is his message? Think about it. Vivekananda is talking in Chicago about opening the world in an open mind, right? Not just open doors, but also an open mind. Very close to the time when what else is happening in America? The great Statue of Liberty is going up in America. Emma Lazarus's great words are being engraved at the bottom of the Statue of the Liberty, right? Her great sonnet which talks about, give me your huddled masses yearning to break free. I hold up my lamp beside the door. I mean, those words are being engraved at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Around the same time when Swami Vivekananda is telling America that I come from brothers and sisters of America, I come from a civilization which has opened its doors to the persecuted through the whole of eternity, right? As long as human civilization has existed, it has held open its doors to persecuted masses, right? So the timing was really right. He was speaking to a people who wanted that message. And I feel we are again at a point today where the world is ready to listen. Why is the world ready to listen? And we're in the land of technology, so it's very worthwhile talking about this. The last chapter of my book, Being Hindu, is called Startup for the Soul. Right? Can we have startups for the soul? No. Should we have a startup for the soul? What is a startup for the soul? What does it really mean? It means one very basic thing. If you think about it, and the great Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari has written beautifully about this, that what is religion? Why must we have religion at all? Why do I care? I have a successful career, I've made money, I will make more money, and I'm comfortable, I have a good life, I've traveled the world. Why do I need God? Why do I even care? Right? We need God because the idea of God is really the idea of a question and an answer. All religions are a question and an answer. How is it a question and answer? If you think about how religions came into being, it's always that the beginning was, where is the truth? Right? That's why the Nasadya Sukta also begins with the line, in the beginning there was neither truth nor untruth. Many of you may have heard the Nasadya Sukta, but you may have not known that it's the Nasadya Sukta. In Bharatiya Khoj, which used to be a serial on Doordarshan, Shyam Benegal made it on Discovery of India. It began, the title role was of the Nasadya Sukta translated in the Hindi language. And it began by saying, Srishti se pehle sat nahi tha, asat bhi nahi. Right? So it begins always with this inquiry of where is the truth? Where is the truth to be found? What is the truth? Now in many faiths, the answer to that question is, well, the truth lies with God. Okay? Then immediately the question is, but where is God? The answer is, God is somewhere. In an undefined location outside your being. You are here, God is somewhere. Right? So then the immediate next question is, well, if I am looking for the truth, and the truth is with God, how do I get this truth? How will it come to me? The answer is, well, it will come through a messenger. Somebody will access the truth, or the truth will be revealed to them, and they will on pass that truth. The question then is, how will they unpass the truth? Usually the answer is through some written form. It could be Moses' tablet, it could be a book, it could be whatever. The revelations contained in a document of some sort, right? And therefore the Swedes believe that the truth lies in the book. It lies in the messenger in the book. Why? Because the truth has been delivered from the Almighty, who contains the truth, down to the messenger who has revealed it in a text of some sort. इससे पहले सत्य भी नहीं था, असत भी नहीं था, तो क्या था? Where is the truth? Right? Hinduism answers that question by saying the truth is inside you. It geographically almost relocates the point of truth to a point inside you. That's why the Hindus say Aham Brahmasmi. That's why the Hindus say Tattvamasi. That's why the Hindus always, the locus standi of truth, so to speak, is always internal. Where is the truth to be found? It is to be found inside you. You know, that's why another monk once joked with me that Swami Vivekananda famously said, every soul is potentially divine. Famous statement, very famous statement of him. Every soul is potentially divine. But most people get fixated on the wrong word in that sentence. Everybody gets fixated on divine. But the most important word in that sentence is potentially. Right? The word is potentially. That's the critical, that's the googly word in that sentence. But everybody immediately, focuses on the word divine. Every soul is potentially divine. So therefore there's potential in each one of us to discover the truth, which lies within us. And then the Sadhya Sukta is even more interesting because it goes on, of course, to say that, well, in the beginning, if there was neither truth nor untruth, what was there? Then it says, well, it was neither this, neither that, da, 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 da. At the end, it says, well, this is very confusing, almost. It was neither any of this nor any of that, so what on earth was it? It answers that question by saying, maybe he knows. Maybe the divine entity we call God, or the Almighty, or whatever you want to call it, that entity knows. But the last line of the Sadhya Sukta is the real googly again. Because it ends by saying, but perhaps even he doesn't know. Right? Now, why are they saying it? Often people don't understand why is this true. Is it because the Hindus are confused? Somebody asked me in one of my lectures, doesn't mean Hindus are really confused. I was like, yeah, for 5,000 years we've been confused. We've been confused generation after generation. That's of course not true. The truth is because it relocates the answer from within you. They're not trying to give you the answer. They're trying to urge you to think of what the answer is. They're trying to urge you to say, the answer is within you. Think about what the answer is. Contemplate on what the answer is. Try and figure out what the answer is. Right? Hinduism is not trying to give you a cheat sheet. I'm at Columbia University. Often when we get assignments, the first thing people do is take the assignment, immediately Google if they can find the answers. Often you can. These are all solved, assignments. And there are all these things, like clegg.com and this.com and that.com. You Google it, point by point, sentence by sentence, the answer is given. So suddenly, at some point, people realized that an assignment would be given to be finished in 3 days and 5 days. It was returning back in 15 minutes. They would open the assignment, 15 minutes back, the assignment is in. What's going on? And they realized, of course, people were immediately Googling and copy-pasting. So then the TAs, who usually, many of you would know, it's not the professors who check these assignments, the TAs who check these assignments. TAs started sending back those assignments another 15 minutes later, saying copy-pasted, 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 copy-pasted. So Hinduism is trying not to do that. It's trying not to give you a copy-pasted answer. It's trying to say, you should figure it out for yourself. Where is the truth? The truth is inside you. Please figure it out. There's a wonderful story of Ramana Maharishi. Many of you would have known him. Ramana Maharishi, as many of you know, spent most of his life on this hill, right? And he was silent for long periods of time. You know, Ramana Maharishi, unlike Swami Vivekananda or Ramakrishna Paramahans or many others who believed in preaching and spoke to vast numbers of people, Ramana Maharishi's wonderful thing was that Ramana Maharishi believed in the presence of the master, the silence itself would give you the answer. Right? So there's this wonderful story told of Paul Brunton. Paul Brunton, of course, is the English traveller. In the 1930s, he goes to Ramana Maharishi and he meets the Ramana Maharishi. And he has all these questions. At that time, Europe is going through strife and so on and so forth. So he has all these questions. So he asks, okay, so then what is going to happen to Europe? Will there be war? If there is war, will Europe survive? And what will happen to Asia? And will Asia support this country or that country in the war? And will we survive? How many people will die? All sorts of questions, right? And he said, but they tell me you're the guru and you should have all these answers, right? Excellent. So Ramana Maharishi was quiet as always for a long time when he was asking all these questions, and after some time turns to him and says, but who's asking these questions? And Paul Brunton is really surprised. He's like, what do you mean? You can see me, I'm sitting right in front of you. I'm asking these questions, you can see me. What do you mean who's asking these questions? So the master smiled and asked him, but who are you? And at that moment, Ramana Maharishi, Paul Brunton says, when Ramana Maharishi asked him, but who are you? He felt all his questions melt away. Because he suddenly realized that all of those questions meant nothing until he had answered the most fundamental question. There are only 3 questions, ladies and gentlemen, I want to put to you that are worth answering in Hinduism. Only 3. There's nothing more to Hinduism apart from these 3 questions. And those 3 questions are, who am I? What do I want? And what is my purpose? Who am I? What do I want? And what is my purpose? You will think, if you think hard, that all of us, or most of us at least, are stuck on really this first question. 20 years ago, if you asked yourself, who am I? You would have got a different answer compared to what you might be getting today. 20 years hence, if you ask yourself the question, who am I? Quite likely you will get a different answer from the answer that you might get today. Most of us will never convincingly be able to give ourselves one answer to the question, who am I? Vivekananda, of course, had answered all of them, right? Ramana Maharishi had answered all of them. The great masters are able to answer all of them. That's why their idea of the bodily self diminishes. That's why they're able to give it up, right? Because they realize the futility, in a sense, of the bodily self. If their work is done, their work is done. I mean, Yogananda supposedly also was somebody who knew when the end was near, and he said that, I will give up my bodily self, right? So, when we consider all these 3 questions, who am I, what do I want, and what is my purpose, most of us are really stuck only on the first question, and our journey is to move from the first question to the second and the third question. The third is very important, because a lot of people, and I had a really, really wonderful conversation last summer in Cambridge with a professor of divinity and philosophy on this, and we spoke for many days about this, asking the question, in a world where many of what we today consider to be human activities are done by machines of some sort. You today feel, oh, my eyesight is going down, you put a spectacle. There might come a day where technology will allow you to do things to your eyes that your eyes will never diminish, right? Aging is being reversed. I once gave a lecture a few months ago in America, and I was speaking to an audience which had many couples, right, and middle-aged couples. And I told them at this point of the lecture that, well, one of the things that we need to consider is that we have constructed human society on the basis of a lifetime span. So all of us will live, if we are lucky, maybe 80, 90. If we are not that lucky, maybe 60, 70, whatever. That's the rough span, right? On the basis of this, we have created society. So you will work for so many years, your retirement age is this, you will get married at this age, you will have children, blah, 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 all of that. But imagine if technology today, as it's almost there, will say, well, actually the human span of life is 150 years. The human span of life is actually 200 years, right? What does it do to our society? What does it do, for instance, to the question of marriage? If you begin to imagine that instead of being married to one person for 40 years or 30 years or 50 years, you will be married to the same person for 90 years. Immediately a lot of, exactly, well said. Immediately a lot of uncles and aunties in the audience looked highly disturbed. That idea looked highly disturbed. You could see it in their faces. Many of them looked highly disturbed by the idea. One auntie even told me, my God. Nightmare. You could see that auntie was definitely disturbed. And uncle beside her was also not very happy. Right? So that's of course saying it in a funny way, but I'm saying if we change this idea of what human life really means, all of us have an idea of what a human life is, right? If we change this entire idea of what a human life means, then many of our most fundamental assumptions begin to change, right? Why should people then get married in between the ages of 20 and 30? People will say, I will get married at the age of 60. Why will I get married? I will lead a great life or whatever, and then I will decide to marry whenever I. Why should there be a huge pressure on women to have children before 40? They will say, I will have children at 80, right? I mean, all those questions, all these assumptions begin to turn on their head when we consider this lifetime span, right? It changes many, many things for us. What it does not change is one fundamental thing, and we had this conversation for many days and came to the conclusion. So if so many things can be changed by technology, then what is really my purpose? In philosophy, they say there is only one question to be answered in philosophy, just one. The whole of philosophy has only one fundamental underlying question. And the question is, suicide. Why should I not kill myself? Because philosophy is concerned with this idea, what is my purpose? Why on earth am I doing these things? Right? What does all of this mean? The great question of philosophy is, what does all of this mean? And if none of this means anything, why on earth am I doing this? Why shouldn't I kill myself? And we came to the conclusion that even though all of these things, technology might change, you will still need religion and you will still need the idea of God, because no technology can give you that answer on why should I not kill myself in the next 5 minutes. The moment you ask the meaning question, you're moved one step closer to the idea of the search of God. Because remember, the search of God is nothing but the search for meaning. Once you've bought everything and attained every position and purchased everything you wanted to purchase, at some point for most people you will ask the question, why am I doing these things? What does this mean? What does buying one more SUV really mean to me? What does acquiring one more home mean to me? What does acquiring a few more clothes mean to me? The moment you ask, what does this all mean? You've moved one step closer to the idea of God. Because God is the answer to that question, what does this mean? Why on earth am I doing this? And Hinduism, many people ask me, so what are the fundamentals of Hinduism? The fundamentals of Hinduism are very simple. The fundamentals of Hinduism are concerned with three ideas. First, somebody asked me the other day, in Hinduism, is God far away or is God near? Remember, we just said earlier in this lecture that many religions put God at a locus standi, somewhere outside us, right? So in Hinduism, is God far away or is God near to us? And my answer to that is only two words. And the answer is, God is, full stop. Because in the Hindu worldview, there is nothing that is not God. So the question of God being far and near does not arise, because everything that you can ever perceive is already God. Vivekananda used to say, you manifest all that there is, manifests out of the divine and collapses right back into the divine. Otherwise known as life and death. All beginnings are out of the divine, all endings are collapsing back into the divine. So the question of whether God is far and near does not arise, because God is. Because there is nothing else but God. This is the point usually in the lecture where a lot of people begin to imagine that I'm much older than I look. This actually happened to me, by the way. I have actually come out of my cars and lectures and people have said, oh, how nice to meet you. ये हिंदोल सेनगुप्ता है क्या आपके साथ? This has happened to me, I kid you not. This has happened 2 or 3 times to me that I've come out of my car in India and somebody has come up to me and said, अच्छा, हाँ, हाँ, आप आए हैं ना हिंदोल सेनगुप्ता के साथ? हाँ, वो कब आएंगे? So, but you know, age is a wonderful thing. I keep reminding them at that time that how old was Swami Vivekananda, how old was the Adi Shankaracharya when he said Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham. But that's the point, right? And Adi Shankaracharya of course understood this. That's why he said Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham. There is nothing that is not Shiva. There is nothing in the whole world. There is nothing that your senses can ever perceive. There is nothing that your mind can think. There is nothing your imagination can ever imagine. That is not God. There is nothing that you can ever do that is not God. There is nothing that you can ever think that is not God. Everything you have been and everything you ever will be is already God. You just don't know it yet. Right? The Hindu imagination has no distance from God because everything is already God. This is a hugely empowering thing. This is a hugely empowering thing because you remember that it means that you're never far away from the answer because the answer lies with God. Right? You're never far away from the answer because the answer is already within you. The answer is already confined within you. Right? There's this wonderful story of Alexander the Great. Yeah? Alexander the Great is on the banks of the river Indus. Right? Alexander the Great, as you would know, was also very young when he arrived at the bank of the river Indus, already having captured most of the known world. He had conquered most of he had left, his home and conquered most of the known world, and he reached the banks of the river Indus. If you've read Greek history, by that time, Alexander's forces were quite tired and weary. They had fought very hard battles, in various parts, including in Persia and so on and so forth, and they finally arrived and they wanted to be home. They had been fighting for many years and so on and so forth. They had left home many years ago. They wanted to be back home. But Alexander has always told them, look, this is our final front, right? If we cross this river and conquer whatever lies after that river, then we would be the first people, and I will be the first Greek warrior to have captured the whole of the known world. I would have done what even Hercules and Odysseus couldn't do. The greatest of the Greek heroes could not do, right? I would have conquered the entire known world. So Alexander is on a horse and he reaches a tree. And under the tree there is a mendicant, an ascetic, a sadhu who's sitting and meditating. So Alexander gets off his horse and goes to the mendicant and asks the mendicant, what are you doing? Because he's intrigued. What is this strange man, bedraggled, sitting under this tree doing? What on earth is this man doing? And the sadhu opens his eyes and turns to Alexander and says, what are you doing? Now nobody has clearly ever asked Alexander that question, right? So he's really befuddled. He says, what do you mean? I'm Alexander of Macedon. I'm conquering the world, right? I'm perhaps the greatest warrior that ever lived. I will conquer the whole of the known world. And then he says, but what are you doing? What are you doing sitting under some random tree in the middle of nowhere with your eyes closed? What on earth are you doing? So the mendicant turns to him and says, I'm conquering myself. I am conquering myself. Because these are two worldviews, aren't they? One worldview tells you, Alexander's worldview tells you that there is only one life. And when that life ends, you essentially cross this river, and if you've done heroic things, you join the great annals of the heroes. You join the pantheon. You find your suitable place in the great pantheon of heroes, which includes all these names, Hercules and Odysseus and all these people, right? In the mendicant's worldview, it is a cycle where the only purpose is to figure it out. I want to keep a little bit of time for questions, so I'll end with this question that many people asked me, and I want to give you the answer. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whenever asked what is Buddhism, is often fond of saying, instead of saying, Buddhism is of course the noble truths of the Buddha and Padmanabha Swami who said this and and Bodhidharma and he basically just says, Buddhism is compassion. It begins with compassion and ends with compassion. Even if you don't know any of the great intellectual knowledge of Buddhism, if you just remember that Buddhism is compassion, that is enough. Because it begins there and ends there. So somebody asked me one day, well, if Buddhism is compassion, what is Hinduism? Right? What is Hinduism then? And my simple answer is, Hinduism is joy. That's why our great forefathers said, Sat Chit Anandam. Right? What is the final point? The final point is happiness. The final point is bliss. And it makes perfect sense. When you give away all this ego and anxiety and status, comparison and acquisitive behavior, all of this when you give up, which point do you read? You read a point and you reach a point which is happiness. It makes perfect sense. All of this brings us to a point to conclude this lecture and say that this is a moment in our history where two foundational principles that has governed nation states and human existence for a very long time are both tottering. Communism has broken up and tottering, if not already tottered, so to speak, in spite of some new revivals and so on and so forth, but entirely discredited. Capitalism too is highly discredited and tottering. You can see this in the city of New York. You can see the income disparity there. I see it every day, right? It's almost unsustainable, the income disparity that exists in many parts of the world. Capitalism too is tottering. There is a third way, a third sustainable way. But that third sustainable way, let me end with the point where I began. Yuval Noah Harari, the great Israeli historian, wrote this piece and said, we used to have this ism and that ism in religion. We are now in data-ism, where we feel God was giving us the answer, now a new God has appeared on the scene, which is the new God, data, which will give us the answer, right? And he says the only way, your notion of free will is entirely getting broken down, and you know that, of course, every time you open Amazon, because you don't decide what you shop on Amazon, Amazon decides what you shop on Amazon, right? That's why many of you will feel, and this happens to all of us, that you feel that you've only thought about a product, but already you are seeing ads appear on screen. What's going on? How is Facebook showing you ads of a product you've only thought about? But of course you have not only thought about it, you have mentioned it somewhere and the algorithm has sucked it up and is throwing results at you, right? So your notion of free will on which all of you lead an existence is highly debatable. And he ended that essay in the Financial Times by saying there is only one answer to this. You will only be able to handle this world better if, and that answer of course immediately took me to the pages of the Upanishads from the pages of the Financial Times. He said that answer is know thyself. And as all of you know thyself could easily be the encapsulated one-line lesson of the Upanishads. That you must know yourself, right? And I want to end on that note because I truly believe we have spent a very long time trying to explain to people, or at least we felt that we've tried to explain to people who have not listened to us, and people feel angry and all sorts of things happen. I have a very different approach. I believe not only are people willing to listen, people are dying to listen to the message. It's just that we don't know how to tell the story properly. We haven't learned how to tell the story properly. I absolutely have no doubt that everybody is dying to listen to our story. I have no doubt that we have the right answers. I have no doubt that we're on the right side of history. I just feel we haven't learned to tell the story properly. If we're able to tell the story better, I believe the world is ready to listen. So my approach is everybody is dying to listen to what you want to tell them. You just have to tell the story better. And I thank you very much for listening to me today, and thank you for coming out, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.